Let's see, Daniel, you want to go next?
Yep.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Daniel Maxey. I'm the JAG specialist at North Montgomery High School in Region 4. I have been with JAG since I started the program there in 2016. So I think Philip and I must have started around the same time. And every year CDC is one of the things I look forward to the most. I have a competitive streak in me. So each year I try to figure out how I can do it a little bit better.
I'll go ahead and go. I'm Stacey White, and I am the JAG specialist at Clarksville High School. I have been at Clarksville. This will be my second year now. The program started in January of 2020, so we're still a very new program, and this was my first year for CDC.
Hey guys, I'm Jennifer Perry. I am the Wawasee High School JAG specialist up in Region 2, and I've done 2 CDCs before. First one was in person, and obviously second one was virtual. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started with some questions. The first one, what do you do as a specialist to prepare for CDC? This is like changes to the manual, coming up with ideas for the class lesson, all that good stuff.
I can go ahead and start. So basically for me, it's definitely reading your manual constantly. It's really going to be your like Bible for this CDC. And just like going over that right before you submit a competition is incredibly helpful. And I even let my kiddos kind of, look over, like, does this meet all the criteria that is in the manual? So they have something, to kind of double check their work with. So definitely just like getting into that manual and knowing it really, really well, I think has been key. And then for me, and Daniel kind of touched on this a little bit, I think just setting the tone, like I have learned about myself that I am kind of a competitive person. And so I'm like, okay, I would like to do really well. And so kind of setting like, not the expectation, but, the precedent that like my desire is to do really well. A lot of the times if you have the good relationship with the kids, they kind of want to, they want to make you proud. And so you just set that, tone that, this is something we're going to start off working really hard with, and we're going to keep working really hard at it. So those are the top 2 things that kind of come to mind just right away.
Yeah, I'd add to that, introduce it early and often. So for a lot of us that have been around and done this a couple times, CDC isn't just an event. CDC is a main part of our curriculum. If you really pay attention to it, all of our competencies are pointing towards this. For me in my class, this is what I actually use as kind of my first semester final. So the students sign up and they take, multiple, each student does 2 events as part of their finals, so that I know I've got a wide variety for me to select from for competitors, but also it's really pushing them to kind of go with what their skill sets might be, or sometimes push themselves outside of their, traditional limits, but show some excitement, enthusiasm, kind of like what, was being mentioned. Just the more excited you are about it, the more the students are going to get excited about it. So when you're presenting it to them, don't just read through the manual and go over all the rules and expectations, but really, if you have examples, if you can get those from people in your region or throughout the state, show those examples, kind of get them pumped up a little bit, but they have that expectation that they kind of want to, make you happy, make them happy, and see the accomplishments for themselves. But
Awesome. Well, the next question, some of that you guys touched on a little bit, is how do you introduce the idea of the CDC to students? I've heard a lot of creative ideas in the past, so I'd love to hear all of those.
I can go ahead and start on this one. So introducing the CDC, like Philip said, early and often. And in fact, it's probably going to be within the first couple of days when I'm giving them an overview of everything we're doing in the JAG program. I start talking about the CDC and how it's usually a field trip that we can go on, and it's a really cool and really fun event. And then I step aside for a second and I have my returning juniors start to talk about their experiences. And so sometimes I will be surprised at their answers because they might have in the moment been complaining about having to dress up or things like that, or being cold outside walking from the bus to the to Ivy Tech. But when they look back on it, they've got some really good memories, and so they tend to share those with students. And then in terms of introducing it, I try to give them as clear a picture as possible of what it's going to look like, and just really building it up as something fun that they can do for themselves.
I'll go ahead and chime in on this one. As far as introducing CDC, this being not only my first year, but our program's first year, in the beginning, I kind of felt like I was going into a blind. Like just didn't, you always hear about it and you hear how big it is, and you know, oh, CDC, you're working on it all year. And I guess this being my first year going into it, I didn't really realize, no, you really do work on it like all year as you're going through, and how important it is to introduce it early. Again, I didn't have any juniors that could speak to my kids about it, but I've the most help I got was reaching out to other specialists who were like, you know, I was like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I get this in there? How do I introduce them to it? And reaching out to other specialists really helped. And you can use ideas that you like, and you don't have to use every idea, but just getting a variety of opinions helped me figure out the right path for me to introduce it to my kids.
And I will add one point, especially for some of you that are newer, if you're listening, we don't always have the CDC manual right away. So like I know Daniel talked about, you know, introducing it in the first couple of days. I've been around, I've got 4 or 5 of them now saved in a file on my computer, so I can pull up those old ones. And yes, there are some changes, and that's why it's very important for us to read through it when we get it and make sure we're familiar with it. But if you are newer and you want to introduce that early on in the year, for some reason we don't have that manual, just reach out to somebody that's been around a little longer and see if they've got a copy of an older one. Primarily the last year's would be the most accurate, up to date. But reach out and get somebody's, you know, manual so that you can familiarize yourself and introduce it very early.
Yeah. Also, I feel like a lot of your normal lessons can tie into a lot of the stuff you're going to end up doing in CDC anyways. So like if I'm doing like a unit on public speaking, you know, I tie in and I just try to like gauge like who's really kind of maybe going above and beyond in this, and then it kind of helps me like choose my participants. But I have like a couple different activities I found that I do basically every year that have been kind of helpful, and I can just quickly highlight a couple of those just go-to things to kind of help prepare. So with so we'll just go with the public speaking one right now. I do like a mystery box where I basically just get this box and I fill it with random stuff from my house or my classroom, and then they have to put their hand in and pull out something, and whatever they have, it could be a fork, it could be a toy dinosaur, it could be like, you know, whatever random thing is in there, then they have like 3 minutes to talk about that item, and it just gets them comfortable talking in front of the class. And it's kind of fun because, you know, there's lots of different things that they come up with, so it can be kind of interesting too, for sure. And then another one I do is like a digital photo story. So I just make a PowerPoint with all these different images on it, and they get an image, they come up to the classroom and their image is like on the big screen, and then they have to do like another 3 to 5 minute like kind of speech, but more so just like a story about that image. So they have to answer questions about that, like where is this photo or image from? What's happening in this picture? What feelings does this picture evoke? Is there a season or time associated with it? What's happening before or after this picture? So it kind of just, again, with the mystery box thing, just gets them comfortable speaking. So there's tons of activities for like each different competition that you can do. For like my creative solution, I have like this crash landing kind of scenario thing we do with like a cargo plane where they have to choose whether they're going to take stuff from the forehold or the aft hold, and then they have to defend why they chose what they chose. And that's a little more for like a virtual CDC than the in-person CDC. If we were in person, I'd kind of switch to more like STEM type activities. So again, a lot of it depends if we're virtual or not, but those are just kind of a couple like go-to activities that I do to kind of prep in those specific competitions.
Awesome. Those are great, especially like having former students talk about it. That's so cool because then they can share like pictures and stuff with the other kids, and that's what gets them excited more. So the next question is, what do you do to keep non-competitors engaged during CDC season? And is that super difficult?
I can start off on that if you guys don't mind. In my classroom, there's no such thing as a non-competitor. We're all working on a competition. So my first year, I was very scared and intimidated by the CDC, like Stacy said, not knowing what I was walking into. And so I didn't push students to be as involved as I could have. In the year since, I've learned that no, this needs to be a big part of class, because what motivation will you have to work hard on your competition when you have a student right next to you putting his head down, taking a nap because he doesn't feel like he's involved? And so in my classroom, there's no such thing as a non-competitor. We will all get a taste of every competition, and then we will decide which ones we like the best that we want to work on. And maybe we're not the main person for career presentation. We're going to be the backup person, and we're going to be helping the main person prepare. They can give your presentation to each other out in the hallway and things like that.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, just some specific examples. Like I know the entrepreneurship skills competition for, the group competition, when my students are presenting that in front of the class and I make them present day in and day out, like we might have 5-10 minutes at the beginning of class, 3 days a week, building up to the actual, regional events. And when they're presenting it, I've got volunteers that are sitting at the front of the class, and they're that Shark Tank panel that's, their challenge is to come up with, why would I want to invest in this type of a business? And the rest of the class, every single time they get, little note cards, scrap sheet of papers, whatnot, and they write, feedback. And it's positive. I challenge them to have one thing positive, and I challenge to have something different every time. It might be the same presentation they've heard 10 times already, but have something different that you can mention positive, and have something different that you can mention, I call it delta, but constructive. So it's something that they can change. So it's not necessarily a negative feedback. It's just something, hey, this is advice to improve upon. And then every time I gather those and I give them to the students. So at least those ones doing the presentation have that feedback that they can reflect on as well. And some of them use it more than others. But, during that CDC season, that, couple weeks, I'll define it as kind of really building up to it. That's a lot of what, we're incorporating. When some students, like Daniel said, there's certain ones that are even easier than others. So when my students pick, some of them are smart enough to go, well, I'm going to pick these 2 events because they're the ones that I don't have to practice as much in or get involved in. And that might be true, but then we also have a chapter event, and the chapter event is everybody's involved. There's somebody kind of running the show and they're coming up with the ideas, but everybody's in some way, shape, or form involved. So if I have students who don't have to do as much, work for their individual events, then guess what? The chapter event needs your help. So go help, and they'll tell you what they can kind of, use you for with that. So there's always a way to just try and find, some activities, whether they're an audience member giving feedback, whether they're, specifically like working with them to help them, public speaking. Sometimes it helps to have them work in small settings first. So pick a couple of, teammates out of the classroom, and you're going to do your presentation to them. And then maybe get another couple of teammates to go in and do your presentation to them, and build up that nerve before you, are more comfortable in front of a larger audience. And it's not just their class. A lot of times, especially when we get close to the competition, I involve, if I have 2 or 3 class periods, my public speaker might be in first period, but you're going to say, like, send the teachers an email, hey, I need this student for 5 minutes at the beginning of second and third period. And usually they're pretty good with that in my school. So I'll keep those students around, and they'll, continue to do it with a new audience and try that again. So, there's, like Daniel said, there's no non-competitors. Everything that we're doing is a part of our, competencies and our curriculum. And so there's some way, shape, or form to be creative and incorporate that, into the classroom. And then you're just pulling from, that information that you have from the students to decide who those true competitors are for that actual event, but everybody's still involved.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I have my kids kind of act as like the judges too, so it gives the actual competitors a taste of, also what that experience is like. So, other things I have, like, for the public speaking, I'll have like interview flashcards, and I'll be like, okay, Sam, you're going to go help Alex with these flashcards. So even if, like, one's the competitor, there's always someone helping them. Because like you said, it's a team thing. So we do that. And then last year with it being virtual, I had people helping with, like, doing the videos and everything. And then one thing new that I did this year was I assigned kind of like a secretary role to the group too, for someone who was not a competitor, and then that person was responsible for keeping that group on track, but also going through the manual and making sure they're meeting all those criteria. So kind of like assigning like an admin person, I found to be really helpful. So just an idea.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go on to the next question. And I know we've, again, touched on this one just a smidge, but with CDC, there's so much that goes into it. It's easy to do. How do you incorporate the Career Association or any of the JAG Advantage pillars in your CDC planning?
Well, CA for me is in charge of, basically, I give them the chapter marketing campaign. So a lot of student voice and choice with this one. So I kind of, I give my CA leadership pretty much huge responsibility when it comes to the chapter marketing of CDC. And then also they're the ones that come up with guest speaker options and ideas at the very beginning of the year. And I try to encourage them to think about, okay, who would be good to hear from, keeping CDC in mind. And that kind of helps guide their decision making and stuff. But just so much of that is student voice and choice.
Okay, well then, do you have anything else? Did somebody? Okay, I didn't want to cut anyone off. So the next one is, do you do anything to assist students who advance to state?
So, go ahead, Stacey.
No, you go ahead.
All right. I'll use this as an example. I had a couple years ago, was our last in-person one for state. Both my region manager and assistant manager have talked about this with my group. I got the privilege of chaperoning because I think it was 6 of my competitors from our region were all going to state and competing in various categories. So I drove them all down and got them situated, in our vehicle and whatnot. When we were checked into our hotel and everything the night before and getting settled in, encouraging the students kind of go back, make sure you're getting to bed early, getting your rest, etc. Our managers got done talking about, these are the expectations, why we're here, behave, be responsible, whatnot. And then they dismissed them. And I'm sitting there with folders for each of my students. And I'm like, hey, before you guys leave, come over. I need to talk to each of you. And it's a lot of what we've already gone through, but I hand them each a folder, and it's got just another copy of their particular event, their rubric, the rules, the expectations. We've talked about it before they left. We've highlighted some things, but it's really just making sure that they don't leave out something simple. I mean, and it could be as simple as just drawing a blank and forgetting to knap the judges when they start. It could be as simple as, oh, I forgot to, write that down or mention that, even though we talked about it over and over, because sometimes the pressure of the event. But I believe that the more we refresh that, the more likely they are to recall it. So, if they need extra copies of things, I had a student competing in employability skills that year. And so she had worked to print off, copies of a resume and everything and have that ready. And I was just reminding her, hey, you've got this letter here. You need to make sure you sign each of these copies beforehand. So there's a pen in there. It's just really providing them with all the resources that they need. If it's career presentation, having those extra copies. A lot of times, and I don't want to do the work for them. It's things we've talked about, and I'll tell them at the school, they don't have access to a printer. So, I'm printing these things for them and getting that out to them. So it's really just going through everything with a fine tooth comb. In addition to, like we talked about before, practicing, presenting, preparing. I'll mention this as kind of a side note as well. I remember that it might have been that year or a different year, but when I was at state one year, there was a student presenting in career presentation, which is where I was fortunate enough to be in that year. And they mispronounced a word that was part of their career presentation. And it's a word that is very, very obviously used in that career. So without going into any specific examples, it's something that they clearly shouldn't have. And all I could think the rest of the time was, did you practice this? Did you present this before? Because somebody should have caught that and said, no, that word is clearly mispronounced. But they kept doing it over and over and over in the presentation. I was fearful for them that the judges would think like me, and they're like, I can't hear what you're saying because I'm focused on that mistake. And it can be a problem. So it goes back to that, just because, you might only have one or two or, students advancing the state, but you still need to find time to make sure that you're not neglecting them and just saying, okay, you did great at regionals, so now good luck moving on. It's our job to still help make sure they're prepared, make sure they practice, and we might take a little break in between, but we're going to get back into it. But, when those students are going to state, I still want to make sure that everything's fresh in their mind when the time comes, that they're, really ready for whatever they need to expect.
Yeah, I think with it being virtual last year, I think my biggest role in assisting my student, who is two students who are moving out of state, was just keeping them motivated because it's like, regional's done, we did good here, and now they feel like it's done because there's a little bit of break in between, and then it's like, no, we're still working, and so just keeping them motivated, I think was a thing that I needed to work on, and that ended up really helping them. Also, I had a kid in particular who was like, can you please remind me the night before to lay out some dress clothes or something? So I'll set my alarm to remind myself, to remind my student to dress. And you would think at that point, he's probably not going to forget. It's a pretty big deal, but just in case. So we try to cover all our bases, make sure everyone's remembering everything. So yeah, there's some of that. And then again, just reminding them of basic Zoom etiquette right before all their interviews and their competitions and all that stuff, because it is a different world. So yeah, that as well.
And then Stacy, did you have something or?
Well, they covered a lot of what I was going to say, but they obviously have not been to the in-person state, but also one of the final things I made sure my kids knew was they worked hard to get there, and they don't need to second guess themselves or underestimate their abilities, because they wouldn't be there if they hadn't earned it. And just to kind of give them that positive affirmation, just so they know that they do belong here too, and they can excel here, and because they are there for a reason, and it's because they did well and they earned it. So I like to add that in for my kids in particular, because they tend to doubt themselves, but they did earn it, and they are there because they worked hard for it. So I like to remind them of that.
That's awesome. And it's also so great to see, no matter what, all the JAG classes are so excited for whoever goes to state. So those are always fun. Okay, so last question before we open up to questions from everyone. What do you wish you would have known your first year participating in CDC? Or what was your biggest takeaway from your first CDC?
I'll go ahead and take that one since it's fresh in my mind. Honestly, coming in, I didn't realize how important the manual was. Obviously, like you hear, okay, this is what it's got it lined up in there. Everything you need should be in there. And I didn't realize how important it was, honestly. So like going through it and making sure I went through it multiple times. I didn't want to, like if I seemed confused about it, obviously my students would not be as confident either. So I wanted to make sure I knew everything that went on with it. And I just honestly didn't realize how important it actually was. I also would obviously introduce it sooner within the curriculum. And I reached out to some other specialists in my area, and there was one in particular who really helped when she said, put it in with your curriculum as you go. That'll help, and you'll be able to like actually everyone has said, you'll be able to pick and choose from there who you want to participate in it. And I did not know this. This is another thing I just learned until Jennifer said it when she was talking about in-person CDC, working on more STEM type activities. So obviously, even when we go back to in-person, I'm still going to have a lot more to learn, doing it in person, because all I know is virtual. So I think those are the main things to take away from it. But ultimately, I feel like my kids worked really hard on it this year, and just giving them that confidence was probably the biggest takeaway. Because to see how they looked at you when you tell them that you believe in them, or to, reaffirm to them that, you worked hard for this, you did a great job. Just those sort of things to build their confidence, and let them know how proud we are of them. I had all of my students that participated this year earned an award, and I had 3 go to state. And just to see how proud they were of themselves, that was really enough for me. Whether they won or lost or whatever they did, they were proud of themselves for what they had accomplished. And seeing that and hearing their positive feedback from it, it helps me feel more confident for the years to come as well. So.
I'll touch on the question of what do you wish you would have known. My very first year, I wish I would have known my definition of a long skirt is not always their definition of a long skirt. So I had been told, like, oh, make sure you get pictures of people's outfits before. And I'm like, that feels a little invasive. Maybe I won't. And I really wish I would have followed that advice, because my outstanding senior came dressed not what I would consider like professional, like at all. Like the skirt was it was too short. It was definitely too short. And I'm like, man, I'm so bummed out by that, because you've done so much work and the judges are going to be focused on your short skirt and not your like amazing skill set. So it was a lesson to me that our definitions aren't the same, and I need to be real specific about things. So that's definitely what I learned. But, the takeaway is always them just gaining confidence, and they just root each other on, and it is awesome. It is awesome to see them like high-fiving them, each other when they get a place or, a win. So it's really cool. It really just brings a lot of camaraderie into the classroom, which is cool.
I'd like to go ahead and chime in on this one as well. What you wish you would have known before your first CDC. The biggest thing for me was how to prepare for this, not knowing what you're walking into and how much time it's going to take. And every year I look at what I need to do to prepare for the next CDC. How can I incorporate that into my classroom so we have enough time to cover the things we need to cover? I can't assume that my students know the things that I know about these competitions or how to prepare. How do I walk them through what they need to know? And so having a plan going in, how you're going to work CDC into your curriculum, into your JAG program year, is the biggest helpful thing for myself these last few years. 2 summers ago, I decided to take a project where I looked at our old CDC manuals. And I took each competition and I started to write down exactly what I would need to do to prepare my students for that competition, thinking, okay, this will be a few pages on Word, this is going to be helpful. And I wound up writing like a 25-page booklet on what I need to do for each competition that really helped me get a clear picture of how to take my students from knowing nothing about their competition to being reasonably prepared for it through what I can teach them in the classroom. And so, like I said, just to recap, I wish I would have known how to prepare for the first one, having like a plan going in, and then how much time it takes to get them prepared for the CDC.
And I would say that's, yeah, very strongly looking back, you know, how I would agree with Daniel on a lot of that is just, I remember my first CDC, we were, you know, submitting all our projects and competitor names. And I look back and I, honest to God, did not sleep for like 3-4 days prior to, because I was so stressed. And I was stressed because I knew it was out of my hands. I was stressed because I wanted so much success for my students, but it was their work. It was up to them to, you know, put in that effort. And you know, it was just the uncomfortable level of not knowing what the expectations were and what it was going to look like and how it was going to come together. But yeah, a lot of that was because I didn't really know how to prepare. So it's tough when you're first starting out, you know, for I think all of us, if not just a lot of us, but the experience each time will help you be more comfortable, help you be better with your students, help you to do what we can do to make sure that they're at that competitive level that they need to be for it. So.
Awesome. Before we open it up to questions, is there anything else you guys had in, or like had another thought about a question that I asked earlier, or do you want to go ahead and open it up to questions? Good. Okay. If you guys want to either unmute yourselves or ask in the chat. If there aren't any questions, I can also go ahead and add the survey. You guys answered all the questions so well, there aren't any questions.
That's what I would say. We did a great job, apparently.
Yeah. And again, all of the sessions will be on YouTube after today. We'll get them all posted up there hopefully by the end of this week, so you can go back and look at something if you thought about it. Oh, we do have a question. What are some ways to get kids excited about the less exciting competitions?
I can tackle that one along with echoing an answer from earlier. So for me, just like there's no non-competitors in my classroom, there are no non-exciting competitions in my classroom. If I were in their shoes, I may not pick the exact same competition or project that they would like, but I am going to find a way to find the cool parts about it, and I'm going to find a way to get them excited about it. As much as we talk about a specialist being a facilitator and things like the Career Association, every specialist as a teacher is the leader of their classroom. You may have student leaders in there that help set the tone, but it is up to you to present it in a way where you're excited about it, where you find a way to tie it into their skills. Maybe you're looking back at their Indiana Career Explorer assessments at the beginning of the year. Hey, you have these skills that you are confident in. This would be such a cool way for you to be able to demonstrate that you can solve problems by doing this critical thinking competition, and you know how to communicate and work with people. And not just that, this is something that you're going to look back on in interviews for college or for a job when they say, tell us about a challenge that you faced and how you overcame it. you're going to talk about your experience at the CDC and how you used your skills to overcome the challenge that your teacher gave you by encouraging you to sign up for this competition. So for the exciting part, you got to set the tone and be excited about every single one, even if you're nervous about it. Like entrepreneurship, that one scares me. I've watched episodes of Shark Tank, but I still struggle with trying to prepare students for it. I'm still going to try to present it in a way where I'm excited about it, even if I'm not necessarily confident in my skills of teaching it.
I will add, the first year that I did this, I mentioned earlier, I make it like kind of a first semester final, and students in my class will sign up for their 2 favorite events, and each one becomes 50% of that final grade. And I'll grade it straight from the rubric, however they're competing, however they're presenting. But I had a student the first year I was teaching that when I was explaining all this, and so we've introduced it, we've talked about it, we've worked on different things. So it's not how I approach it up front. But then, come beginning of November, I start to talk about how, hey, all this stuff we've been working on, it's very beneficial because this is going to be your final. You're going to sign up for, these events. So we've had the excitement. We've worked on things. I had one student who goes, well, what if I'm not interested in any of them? And I believe there were 13 events at that time because the chapter used to be separate events as well. And so he's, what if I'm not interested in any of them? And I thought for a second, I said, name another teacher, another class that you've had in this school where when you get any sort of a final, that you get to choose what you want to do for it. You're getting a test and it's an assessment of what you've learned. I'm like, this is your assessment to show me what you've learned because you're implementing the skills instead of just answering questions. So I'm like, you're telling me out of 13 things, because there's a category for, if you're artistic, if you like speaking, if you like writing, I mean, there's something for everything. And so when I said that, I remember him just kind of pausing for a second and going, okay, well, that seems fair. And then he picked 2 things. So it was just kind of that realization, like, yeah, you're right. Like, there's an opportunity. So it's not so much about the events are less exciting. It's finding, like Daniel said, using those assessments, using what tests you can, talking to the students, getting to know them, but seeing what they're interested in. I've had a 1 year where I basically I had nobody at all interested in public speaking. I couldn't convince a single person. Finally, I started going down the list of, okay, who do I think would be good with this, even though they don't want to? And I wound up bribing a student with 3 lunches at Subway to do my public speaking, and they got 3rd place in regionals. And looking back, they were in tears when their name got called because they were so excited, so proud of themselves for that 3rd place accomplishment. And I'm like, that's something they never would have done. I'm getting kind of chills thinking about it again, but it's something they never would have done, had I not really, gotten to know them and pushed them into it. So they didn't see public speaking as exciting, but once she got into that, she realized. So it's, sometimes we're trying to make those tough decisions for them and really pushing them along to grow into their own. So
that's awesome.
That is awesome. I have one thought about that also. I try to kind of like pull out their competitive spirit as much as I can too. So say like, Wallasey hasn't placed in financial literacy before, so I'll be like, hey, like we haven't placed in this, like it would be so cool if we could like place, or we like, we haven't, ever gotten 1st place in this, like let's try for this, so kind of comparing like how you've done in the past and how you want to do in the future, specifically with those ones that are considered less exciting. So like I still can't seem to get a financial literacy person. So I'm gonna like go real hard on that next year, to kind of just be like, all right, let's do this. So yeah, just pulling out their competitive stuff.
Another question we had in the chat was how do you organize students competing in the group events?
I can start off on this one if you guys don't mind. So for organizing students, I made some mistakes my very first year of just kind of presenting all of the different competitions and saying, hey, sign up for one. And what I've since learned in the last couple of years, I've really become a JAG curriculum nerd. I love figuring out how to teach what we do in better ways. And so when I was looking at curriculum, I would ask myself, okay, why these competencies? And when I look at the CDC, I think to myself, why do we have these competitions specifically for CDC? And so then that got me thinking, well, they relate to the JAG competencies very well. They're important for student success in life. So I want my students to experience as much of that as possible. So what I do each year, for the last couple of years, I'm going to teach every single competition as part of my classroom experience. And it's tough to try to fit everything in before our regional CDC. But I want to have every student take every CDC competition as an in-class project where we're working on it in some way or shape or form. And then by the time we get to signing up for CDC, they will have a taste of every single competition. They'll have a good idea of what it's about and what it might feel like and how well they think they're going to do in it. So then that splits my students up into 3 different groups. When it's time to sign up, I have students that are excited about competitions because they like the project throughout the year and they sign up right away. And then I'm going to have a group of students who hasn't signed up right away. They might give it a day or two. So I get to pull them aside and say, hey, why haven't you picked your competition yet? Do you know what it is you're interested in? And those are my kids on the fence that just need a little bit more encouragement from me to go ahead and sign up for a competition. And then I can pull out some of the things I've noticed about them over the course of the years they're specialists, why I think they would be good at different things. I can point to their work on different projects and encourage them, yes, you should sign up for this one because look how well you did. And then I've got that third group, and my third group is kids that are just either too scared, or sometimes we all have students that are too unmotivated to sign up for competitions. And usually that's going to be less than 5 students. And then those are the ones that I have to say, okay, well, this is a part of class. You have to participate. It's not going to be fair for you to just sit there when I've got kids working on this, during our CDC prep time this week. It's not fair for you to do that. And it's not consistent for me as your teacher to allow you to do that when they're working hard. So I have to basically assign them to one. And they may be my, what's the word in plays where you're not the main person, but if the main person gets sick, you fill in for them. I'm blanking on that word.
The understudy?
The understudy, exactly. So some of those students might be my understudy, because we are going to have students that are unable to go to the regional CDC. So they may be the understudy, and then I can push them and encourage them to try to compete even though they're not the main cast member for that part. So the organization, if you give them a chance to experience all the competitions, by and large, they will organize themselves and sign up for the ones they like. And I do it first come, first serve, where if I can only have 2 kids in each category for each competition, when those are full, okay, let's look at your second and your third choice and let's see if we can get you in there.
Yeah, I think with chapter events, if it's a chapter, as far as group, if it's a chapter event, a lot of times I have the students, if they sign up for a chapter event as part of mine, then they have to at least come up with the idea, whether it's, a brochure or commercial, whatnot. They're coming up with the idea. They don't have to be the main worker on it. And then we can recruit some of, I mentioned earlier, those students that maybe aren't as engaged in whatever else they're doing. We can recruit those persons to get involved. So the chapter event, working as a group, they kind of have a student leader of that group that kind of recruits others in. If it's the actual group events for me, organizing those students competing, they really have to sign up as a group. I don't want to just force students, where somebody's signing up because, oh, it's a team thing and somebody else will do all the work for me to figure it out. So they do have to be a part of it. They have to have a mindset because the group events, usually the entrepreneurship, we have a couple activities that we've done in the past early on in the semester where they're just doing like a fun little, business sales pitch or something, kind of like Jennifer mentioned with her public speaking activity in the mystery box. It's something similar to that. And so they get a little taste of it and challenge them to think outside the box of different, creative projects or whatnot. And so sometimes it's from those that they stem, their ideas. But a lot of times it's a small, 2-3 friends that decide, hey, let's work on this together and come up with this. And they've been successful. And I've actually had 1 or 2 where students actually do have businesses that they've put forth. So yeah, the groups, they have to choose themselves for the most part, but kind of like Daniel said.
And the question of will the speaker's contact information be shared? You guys can either put it in the chat if you want, but I believe it will also be in the follow-up email. I will check with Christine about that. And if it's not going to be in the follow-up email, now it will be. So, oh, and I missed one. Sorry. Will the speaker? Oh no, not that one. Sorry. When in the semester do you have students sign up for competitions?
So for mine, when I talk about it being like their first semester final, because we want to get everything, as much in before the competition, January, February as we can. I have them sign up no later. The latest I've ever done was right before Thanksgiving break. Because when we come back after Thanksgiving, a large part of that next couple of weeks for us is really devoted towards CDC specifically and preparing. So we might have some prep time in class. Probably no more than 1 or 2 days a week where we're kind of prepping in class in various forms. But yeah, they sign up usually around like early November is where they're kind of, because like we've talked about, they have a chance to explore some of the competitions and do some of these as a part of class. So now they can have a little bit of a taste for it and think about what they're interested in and sign up for those, according to those interests then at that point.
Yeah, I do the same thing right before we go on break for Thanksgiving. I make sure I have all my competitors kind of solidified, and then when we get back, we just hit the ground running.
And then how much time do your students work on CDC inside versus outside of class?
For my school, as I mentioned, I try to teach each competition as a part of my drag curriculum throughout the year. And when you do it that way, you're covering a lot of material in a short time because that takes up the entire first semester until the end of December. And so to give them a taste of it, I can use the rubric and to get them to do a pretty good job on it. But in order for them to do really well, to win their competitions, to place in their competitions, to go on to state, I talk with them about things that they need to do that we just don't have class time to cover. And that's when you really see students stepping up. If they are serious about competing and doing well at it, they're going to put in some extra time outside of class, or they might come see me later in the day when I'm not teaching and I'm doing data management work and we can work on something, or they will talk with their English teachers about looking over their presentation and making sure it looks good and things like that. So I haven't mandated that they work on it outside of class just because of the way I run my JAG program, but I have noticed that the students that take the initiative are the ones that do well because I only have so much time that I can use to prepare them in class.
And I'm going to kind of piggyback off that a little bit too. I agree with what Daniel said. I mean, we covered, what we could obviously during our class periods, and but the ones who really excelled and the ones who really, you could tell who really wanted to be a part of the CDC, worked on it outside of class as well. I also had some students who reached out to like their English teacher, for example, or just someone that they felt comfortable asking. For example, my public speaking student, he had a particular person he felt comfortable asking, to listen to his speech and how, let him know how it went and what does he need to work on. So I do feel like obviously inside of class time, we work on as much as possible. But those who really, really excel at it and really, really want to be a part of it also work outside of class as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share the survey link. And then if you guys have any other questions after this, you can contact those people. Thank you guys so much for your time. Appreciate it. And your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank everybody for listening.